conversation. My name is Kate Celius. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Samaritan House. This is the second session in a speaker series focused on issues surrounding domestic violence and human trafficking. Our guests are experts in their field, survivors, and others who connect with Samaritan House and these topics in some way. Our goal is to share their experience, strength, and hope with you, the viewer. Knowledge is power, so we want to empower you, the community. Thank you for allowing us to do that today. Thank you for starting the conversation. I've invited two people to join us today. Courtney Pierce, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Courtney Pierce. I am the Anti-Trafficking Outreach and Direct Service Coordinator at Samaritan House.
And Diane Garrison, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Diane Garrison. I am the Vice President of the Mattaponi Healing Eagle Clinic up on the Upper Mattaponi Tribal Grounds.
Wonderful. And thank you to Slover Library in Norfolk for allowing us to film in their production studio. Thank you. We would first like to acknowledge, do a land recognition. Diane, if I could
Sure.
turn to you to do that.
Yes. Land recognition in Virginia has changed considerably within the year 2016 with the tribal recognition of the Pamunkey tribe. And then in 2018, we had 6 more tribes come on, which was the Upper Mattaponi, which is in King William, the Rappahannock, which is in St. Stephen's Church, and the Nansen tribe, which is over in Suffolk, and the Chickahominy tribe, which is in Providence Forge, the Eastern Division of the Chickahominy, which is in Providence Forge, and one of our largest nations is the Monica Nation in South Amherst, Virginia.
Thank you for that. People of color, including Indigenous people, are disproportionately affected by domestic violence and human trafficking. In today's discussion, we'll aim to raise awareness of this issue, discuss ways to serve these communities. The intersectionality of race and human trafficking is a significant topic that must be addressed. Courtney and Diane are here with me today to do just that. So to help frame our conversation, I've asked Courtney to bring some statistics to the table regarding human trafficking. Would you like to share what you've found?
Sure, so I'll be sharing some of the statistics that we have at Samaritan House. So since the inception of the task force in 2016, Samaritan House has served 147 victims/survivors of human trafficking. And overall, Samaritan House, our service population is 65% African American women for all of the populations that we serve, which is domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and homelessness.
Thank you. So this is a pretty big deal, to say the least. Diane, I know you've got some statistics that get a little more granular.
Yes.
Maybe you'd like to share some of those to, again, help the viewer just frame this conversation.
Thank you. The National Human Trafficking for Native Americans is the trafficking across a lot of them are with survivors are 22,326. The traffickers that they've attached that to have been 4,384, and we have businesses in that area that they found for 1,912. So there's a lot of traffickers, and there's a lot of businesses that we contribute. A lot of Native American people being trafficked through. So.
Right. Now, Diane, do these numbers surprise you? I mean, what do you see among the tribal citizens, around domestic violence, around human trafficking?
No, it really doesn't surprise me too much. What I am surprised with are some of the states that actually pick up some of the trafficking. And the largest one we find that has a lot of the tribes that have a lot of the trafficking is out in California. Virginia doesn't fall under that too much because we don't have that big a population. Here in Virginia, the Native American population is only 86,798. So compared to Oklahoma, where I'm from, it's 526,408. So relatively, trafficking in Virginia doesn't kind of equate like it would out in Oklahoma or California. So it's not as high. And that goes down to Virginia only has like 1.1%, so it's really not a lot of Native Americans that you would see. A lot of it here is probably not as prevalent as you would see out in California or Oklahoma. Yes.
And one thing we had discussed earlier, the kind of some of the whys and some of the how is it happening. And we, I think both of us actually, all three of us talked about casinos
Yes.
on reservations. Do either one of you want to jump in and talk about that a little bit?
Do you wanna-
Well, I'll just talk about the why in the sense of Black people or African Americans, and then BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Those folks are in marginalized communities, and so where there's marginalized communities, there is oppression found, and oppression is the cause for trafficking, because we have folks that want to oppress others. And so I would say overall, when we're looking at communities of color, because there's marginalization that comes along with segregation in housing, and it comes along with segregation in schooling and education, as well as building wealth and finances for your family, I'm seeing overall that most people that are victims of some sort of violence happen to be people of color.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. Typically, what happens is in areas where, of course, like you said, the economic and the social is suppressed by groups of people on the outside, they have a tendency to be trafficked more because they're looked at a whole lot different than what maybe a general population would be. And so what happens is people have a tendency to look at them as like a trophy or things like that. And a lot of times you'll find, especially where there's large populations of reservations, the economic there is the only source of income will be the casinos or pipelines or construction where there's especially roads and things out in the Southwest or in the Plains states. And that has a tendency to draw a lot of people to that area that prey on indigenous people of color. And they look at almost like a trophy or some type of fetish.
Well, you had talked about the economic kind of disparity, and it sounds to me like this is what's happening on these reservations. It's no secret that we have the folks who are making the money and the folks who are not, and we're working it for the people that are making the money.
Yes.
So that seems to me that that's just sort of compounding the issue. Yeah. So I like this. We're getting to the real nitty gritty now, guys. Before we jump into the talking about systemic or institutional racism, I think it's important to kind of talk about what is racism. You know, and I know you've done some research on this, Courtney. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sure, and I think it's important to actually define something, because when we have conversations about race, which can be difficult at times, we're oftentimes talking past each other. So I did want to read the definition of racism from a sociological standpoint, and it goes as follows. Racism is defined as those ideas or ideologies that assert or imply that assumed superiority of one social group over another, together with institutionalized power to put those perceptions into practice in ways that control, exclude, and exploit. Those are racialized as different or inferior. In other words, they are marginalized and exploited based off of race and ethno-cultural groups, are due to the link between the dominant perception that reflects assumed superiority. And so when we talk about race and we talk about racism and white supremacy in America, we see that there is a divide between people of color and people of European descent or people of whiteness, and it creates a dominance, and it shows throughout all spectrums, particularly when we're talking about survivors of violence, domestic violence, as well as human trafficking.
So
What are your thoughts on that?
yes, that hit it right there. It's basically one group of people dominating another group of people, and if they don't stand up and talk about their own culture or their own needs and things like that, it is suppressed, and then they're looked down on because they don't stand up or say the things that they need to say about their own culture or their family dynamics a lot of times. So, and that has a tendency to be discriminated and basically racism.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it sounds, one word that jumped out to me was control.
Yes.
And something that we have at Samaritan House that I know is not specific to Samaritan House. It's a tool we use in the field of domestic violence and human trafficking is the power and control wheel. So that's kind of like the first thing my mind went to, and talking about whether it's one person who's domineering over another, whether it's one group that's domineering over another. The parallels are there. I love what you said about speaking up and sharing your culture and standing up for your culture, because I think the more we can be aware, and we'll talk about awareness later too, the more we can be aware of these marginalized groups and not just sort of tuck them away, the more we can really help them and serve them. Yeah. Let's see. So speaking of awareness, why do you think awareness is lacking?
Yeah.
A lot of questions,
Yes.
right?
I think awareness is lacking because it's a difficult subject to talk about. The oppression of people, the abuse, the marginalization of people groups is a difficult conversation to have. But I think that when we have difficult conversations respectfully, we bring them honor and dignity, and it invites everyone to be a part of it, because really this is everyone's problem or everyone's issue, because we live in families and we live in neighborhoods and we live in communities. And so if my neighbor is hurting or if my neighbor is in need, then it would behoove the community to be a part of helping to solve those issues and be able to support that person through what's needed.
Diane, are there certain things you've noticed in your work and in your community that are signs that someone may potentially be being trafficked? Are there signs to look for?
Yes, and again, a lot of times I have to refer back to Oklahoma because it happens more there than it would here in Virginia and in the Dakotas and out in California. You see trafficking so much more because the potential there for the dynamics of the family to break down, especially if the not able to provide for a family member, then the one that has been kind of ostracized from the family because of employment or things like that, you notice it more, and it becomes a real problem then within the dynamics of their own families, trying to support the healing of the family or the social part of it. And so you do notice a lot more when those things start happening.
Yeah. And I guess finally, before I get to regalia, I want to talk about what can we do to help? What can Samaritan House do to help? What can the community do to help?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just being respectful to one another. And I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid if you see somebody different from you to ask them. I think that is a learning. And I get people all the time saying things to me, and I do that, look at them like that little dog look, like, what are you talking about? Because I forget that there's people out there that don't understand different cultures. Like, they'll ask a question, or I'll hear two African American people talking, and I'm like, wait a minute, what does that mean? I stop and ask them. And sometimes I get things said to me, like, why do you do this or why do you do that? And I respectfully thank them for asking me so that they can be educated, because education is power.
Yep.
And don't be afraid if somebody looks a little different from you or talks a little different from you, because you really do learn, different things. And to me, that's amazing. We have to learn things. So.
And that is just such a great segue to me asking about the regalia. I'd love to hear about its history, its significance today.
Okay. Well, regalia does mean regal, and regalia is usually worn when we do powwows or we have social gatherings. It can vary from tribe to tribe, and I know when I got out from Oklahoma to Virginia, I did that little puppy look when I went to the powwows, because even though Native American is a term, there's so many different ideas and tribal things that they do within their own tribes, and even going from the upper Mattaponi maybe over to the Chickahominy tribe, which is 50, 60 miles, you learn things. So much is so different. So regalia can be different clothing, different adornments, or jewelry. And the only thing that they ever ask is if you come upon a Native American, please don't reach out and touch them. Please don't touch their hair. And it's just respect. And usually you'll find, that's the biggest thing I give is you could ask somebody, you'll say, oh, can I touch your regalia or something like that? No, you need to ask before, especially people that are adorned in a lot of nice regalia. And so there's different types, and you'll even notice different people will wear different types of regalia depending on how they dance at powwows. And so that's a real interesting things. We have, traditional women's dances. We have shaw dances. We have men's dancing, bustle dancing, grass dancing. And the men and the women will wear the regalia that they feel most comfortable when they dance. And so a lot of times if you see them in a certain kind of regalia, it's a lot of times the part of the country they're from or how they feel spiritually to their tribe or their customs. So
thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that was really cool. Yeah. So we're about out of time. I want to thank both of you as we talked about this topic, the intersectionality of race and human trafficking. It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you to those who took the time to watch or listen today. I hope you got just as much out of it as I did. If your organization, school, or place of worship would like to learn more about domestic violence or human trafficking, our education team can virtually present to your group on these topics. If you're interested in making a financial contribution to Samaritan House, you can text SAM to 50155 or visit our website at SamaritanHouseVA.org. Thanks, and see you next time.
thank you.